Nan McKay & Associates has produced this video to be used in informing clients of their rights under federal fair housing laws. Use of this video is limited to authorized users who have purchased the video Your Rights Under Fair Housing from Nan McKay & Associates. Unauthorized use is subject to civil and criminal penalties. Your housing authority is committed to making sure that if you have a disability that limits a major life activity, you can get around in your unit and around the property. Your housing authority is also committed to ensuring that you have an equal opportunity to use all of the services it provides. If you need an accommodation for a disability in order to have full access, please let the housing authority know. An accommodation means changing something in a dwelling unit, or making a policy more flexible, or doing something in a different way to give you an equal opportunity to apply for and to live in public or assisted housing. Also, if you need communication assistance because of a visual or hearing impairment, or because of a language barrier, please let your housing authority know. The purpose of this video is to give you an overview of your right to fair housing. We're not lawyers, and this isn't legal advice. We're just providing you with the information you need so that when you're finding a place to live, and even after you move into a unit, you know what your rights are. Keep in mind, though, it's a little bit different everywhere you go, so your housing authority's policies might be slightly different from the ones we discuss here. What is discrimination? It means being treated differently when you didn't ask to be treated differently. Have you ever felt you were being discriminated against because of your age? Or because of the religion you practice? Or because you're a man or a woman? Have you ever felt it was hard to apply or to live somewhere because of your disability? How about being told you couldn't live somewhere because you have children? Well, the government thinks that all people should have equal access to housing, regardless of their age, religion, gender, disability, color, race, national origin, or family status. If you feel you've been discriminated against for any of these reasons, you should know that there are laws that protect you and allow you to have the same choices in housing that other people have. There are different types of discrimination. Sometimes discrimination is obvious. For example, when somebody says, "I don't want you here because of the color of your skin," or because you're from another country. Other times, discrimination may not be obvious, but it still counts as discrimination. That could even mean advertising. Any advertising you see sending a message that says, "We don't want you here," could be illegal. So if you saw an ad while you were searching for housing that said, "bachelor pad," that could be discrimination based on gender. If you feel pushed into choosing one unit or one neighborhood over another, that's discrimination as well. A landlord should never tell you that you have to live at a certain end of a building because you have children, or that another neighborhood would be better for you because of the language spoken there. That's called steering, and that's against the law. Fair housing laws also protect people with disabilities. If you need a change in the rules or services provided by your housing authority, you may request one. If your housing authority decides the change is reasonable and will remove a barrier to housing caused by your disability, then it may be able to make the change for you. Let's talk about someone who actually requested a change like this. This is Mrs. Smith. She moved into a public housing unit on the second floor in a development without elevators. Then she became disabled and now uses a walker. Now Mrs. Smith has requested to move to a unit on the first floor because it's going to be easier for her to get in and out of her unit. The housing authority will grant Mrs. Smith that transfer. Now let's talk about Mrs. Jones. Mrs. Jones is in the Housing Choice Voucher, or Section 8 program. Mrs. Jones finds a unit she likes, and she's going to sign the lease with the landlord, but she finds that she needs a ramp to get her motorized scooter in and out of the unit. Mrs. Jones asks the landlord if she can have a ramp constructed, and the landlord allows her to do so. In this case, because she's in the Housing Choice Voucher program rather than the public housing program, Mrs. Jones will need to pay for the ramp herself. These are just two examples of accommodations or changes that a housing authority or a landlord could make or allow to ensure that a person with disabilities has equal access to housing. These changes will each be considered on their own merits, but accommodations aren't just for making physical modifications. They may also involve altering the way your housing authority communicates with you, allowing you to have an assistance animal or a live-in aide, or making other changes in policies or practices. If you have a disability that prevents you from making full use of the services that your housing authority provides, please let the staff know. If there's a connection between the request and your disability, your housing authority can work with you to find an appropriate accommodation. Take Ms. Garcia, for example. Ms. Garcia wants to apply for housing at the Main Street Housing Authority. Ms. Garcia is a person with a hearing impairment, and she asked the housing authority if it could provide a sign language interpreter for her. The Main Street Housing Authority has decided to do that in all of its meetings with her, and it will pay for the interpreter. Your housing authority doesn't just offer communication help for people with disabilities. It also can provide services for people who may have trouble reading, writing, or speaking English. If you need assistance with language, let the staff at your housing authority know what language you speak. If you need translation or interpretation services for an interview or for any of the paperwork you receive, they should be able to provide the services at no cost to you. How many of you have ever felt your landlords or neighbors were discriminating against you because you have children? If you've been charged a higher deposit, moved to a different kind of unit, or even turned away because you have children, that's against the law. The law protects more than just biological children. Foster children, adopted children, and even women who are pregnant are protected too. If you're in the public housing program, your housing authority should treat all families equally. If you're in the Housing Choice Voucher program and you believe a landlord has turned you away or treated your family differently than a family without children, please talk to your housing authority immediately. You may be the victim of discrimination, and discrimination is against the law. You should also be aware of your rights if you are a victim of domestic violence. The Violence Against Women Act protects you from being denied housing or losing your housing just because you're a victim of domestic violence. This law applies to men, women, and children, and its protections extend to victims of dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. If you are a victim of domestic violence, please let the staff at your housing authority know so that they can explain how the law protects you and what you need to do to prove that you are a victim. Kate Nelson is a victim of domestic violence. She has fled from her abuser with her daughter, and she is applying to Oakdale Housing Authority. The staff find out that she has a poor rental history, and they're worried about whether she's going to be a good candidate for their program. If Ms. Nelson can show that her poor rental history is the result of domestic violence, the housing authority staff will overlook her history and let her into the program. They won't deny her rental assistance just because of her victim status. Remember, domestic violence laws apply to both women and men. So do sexual harassment laws. Whether you are a man or a woman, you should know that you don't have to put up with sexual harassment just to keep your housing. Sexual harassment can be anything from inappropriate words or touching to pictures that make you feel uncomfortable. If you feel you've been a victim of sexual harassment, please let the housing authority know immediately. Someone will help you navigate the situation so that you feel safe. Sexual harassment is illegal, and you will not lose your housing if you report it. According to the law, no one can get back at you for reporting an incident of sexual harassment. In other words, you won't put your housing at risk even if you report sexual harassment against an employee of the housing authority or a landlord. The law makes that illegal. Jane Thomas is in the Housing Choice Voucher Program. She was experiencing plumbing problems and called her landlord to help her with the maintenance. The landlord said that in return for the maintenance, he wanted a sexual favor. This is against the law, and if Ms. Thomas reports the incident to local law enforcement and the housing authority, the landlord cannot evict her for reporting him. Harassment comes in many forms. It's also against the law for someone to harass you, intimidate you, send you threatening letters, or attack you for living somewhere just because you're a certain race, gender, religion, color, or nationality. That's called a hate crime, and hate crimes are not tolerated in public or assisted housing. If you think that you've been the victim of a hate crime, that someone is threatening you or using force against you because of who you are or where you live, contact the police, then contact your housing authority as soon as possible. Take Ms. Ali, for example. Ms. Ali comes out to her car one morning and sees offensive graffiti painted on it. Ms. Ali has reason to believe that the graffiti is there because of her faith and that her neighbors don't want her living where she lives. This is a hate crime, and Ms. Ali needs to call the police as well as report the incident to her housing authority so that action can be taken against the people who spray painted her car. Ms. Ali has a right under the law to live where she wants to live without harassment. The people we've met in this video may have reasons to file a fair housing complaint against their landlords, their neighbors, or their housing authority. There are different ways to file a complaint. Take the Smith family, for example. If the housing authority incorrectly denies Mrs. Smith's transfer request, even though the request is reasonable and clearly connected to her disability, the Smith family could go to HUD's website at www.hud.gov and file a fair housing complaint there. They could also get a form from the housing authority, fill it out, and mail it in. Or they could call their local fair housing office and file a complaint by phone. Remember, your housing authority must help you file a fair housing complaint with HUD if you feel that you've been discriminated against. So if this happens, don't hesitate to ask for assistance. If you do file a complaint, make sure that the information you provide is accurate. The law states that if you commit fraud or knowingly lie to your housing authority or to HUD, you could face legal consequences or be fined up to $10,000. So make sure that whatever you report gives the full picture of the actual events that happened. What we've seen in this video represents what the law is all over the country. The laws in your state or city may provide even more protections than the federal laws. To find out whether your state or city offers additional protections under the law, try going to the internet and doing a web search for fair housing laws in your area. For example, if you live in Chicago, type Fair Housing Laws in Chicago. Remember, fair housing is everybody's right. Fair housing laws have been put into place to make sure that everyone has an equal opportunity to housing. If you feel that you've been discriminated against, please talk to the staff at your housing authority, and they will help you.